talk about a lot about the masculine and feminine polarity. So that's the thing that comes up a lot. How the online dating has changed quite a bit.
Mm.
And a lot of people are getting offline. And lately I've seen a lot of people saying that they just want to stay in no relationship at all. They just want to be single forever because they find that when they allow somebody into their life, then their peace gets disrupted. So
Yeah, it does
yeah.
get disrupted, but I think it's also an exchange. And I think
Mhm.
people, personal experience, it's just like we've hit this weird point in the world today where it's too easy to not have any difficulty around you, including being in a relationship. Because oftentimes, if you really take the time to examine the parts of yourself that will come up in relationship that go into conflict of who you thought you were or what you want to be, that's a good opportunity to try to like better yourself. But a lot of people take it as like I don't like this. I don't like the fact that I'm having to change my behavior or do something different than what I was doing before. And I think there's this is me speaking off the cuff, but I think there's a certain benefit to
Mhm.
relationships that there is like a forcing of maturity in a way. Like you kind of have to learn to grow up to be in a healthy relationship. But if you are in a healthy relationship and you're a happy person, there's an extra benefit on top of that down the road if you stick with it. What is like the age range of the women you're mostly working with right now? Is it just like everything and anything under the sun, or is it a particular gap?
Yeah, anywhere from like 35 to even into their 70s. Um, the group that seems to be lacking is the girls or the ladies that are in their 20s, and I think it's because they're just one, they're not looking to really get coaching because they don't want to pay for it, or they can't pay for it because they're just kind of like trying to establish themselves in their own lives. But we do have a lot of women who are in that age range of like 50s, 60s, where a lot of them have been in long-term relationships or even marriages, and then it hasn't worked out. So now they're kind of finding themselves or wanting to get into a relationship again. So they don't have dating experience. They're kind of like, I don't even know how to date. I don't know how to put myself out there. I don't know how to have conversations with men because they haven't done that in a while. Some of them, their husbands have passed away.
Mm.
So, they've gone through like their grieving. And so they haven't been on the dating scene for like a couple of years. And now they're, wanting to connect again.
The conversations with men part is kind of funny. And I wonder
Yeah.
like how many relationships out there people just kind of like were coexisting at separate jobs or separate places or whatever it may be. And this is what I'm finding very funny. My own experience is like, I'm wondering at some point in the past, was there an understanding of how men and women operate? And now, for whatever reason, we just lost it in the last like 100 years. Like, I wonder
Yeah.
if there was a point way back in the day where just kind of, maybe it was just the nature of the world that was like, we didn't have to understand each other, we had to just survive. And now that we're thriving, we're like, well, how the hell do we talk? Well, who are you people? Where did you come from? I don't understand.
Yeah. 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 And the whole needing thing, like men are not knowing where they're needed anymore in a relationship because
Yeah.
women, I know we touched on like the whole feminist movement, and just the other day I was watching I think a show or something on TV, and this woman said feminists have ruined it for us because now women can't stay at home if they want to stay at home because it's looked down upon and it's not really valued in the world anymore. Whereas being a mom and staying home and taking care of kids and even taking care of the household or even being there to support the husband if he's like running like a huge, even, multi-million-dollar business or whatever it may be, is looked down upon. Now, the one thing that I think is cool is even if you do want to stay home, I think it's still important that a female has her own source of money or some kind of
Mm-hmm.
income, even if it is coming from her husband, that it's put aside like, okay, like this is your money. Because what if all of a sudden husband was taken out of the picture? Like,
Mm-hmm.
heaven forbid, like physically he couldn't do his job or whatever the case might be. She's going to have to be able to support herself,
Mm-hmm.
and just not rely on the income of someone else. Like I think it would be sad for women to think that they could just rely on someone else's income, whether it be a man or anybody. But a lot of women, they're successful now financially because a lot of women do work. So it's finding that thing too where when you partner with someone that guy is comfortable. I think that communication piece where you figure out what each other's roles are so that the man does feel needed, but
Yeah,
it's not just
yeah.
financially. I mean, so many levels.
There's a good story. It's a guy named James Sexton. He's a divorce lawyer. He wrote a couple books. He's pretty popular in parts of like the angry dating parts of the YouTube
Mm-hmm.
internet.
Mm-hmm.
He talks a lot. He does a lot of like multi-million dollar, sometimes $1 billion divorces, like really high-end clientele.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, I might have mentioned this before to you privately, but he mentioned this really funny story about how there was a guy who was getting divorced and he had like 3 women he was in contact with outside of his marriage. And the divorce lawyer was like, "So you're sleeping with them, right?" And he said, "No." And he's like, "Listen, I'm your lawyer. Like you have, there's no point in like not in lying to me. Just tell me the truth." And he's like, "Honestly, I'm not." And he's like, "Then what the hell are you doing with these 3 women?" He's like, "They make me feel appreciated. I have enough money that I could do stuff for them. I can do things like I helped one with her car payment. I helped one with like her college tuition. I helped another one like buy just do stuff around the house, fix stuff, and they just like I just feel so appreciated for like
Mm.
being able to do something for them. But in my home with my own wife, like I can't do anything right. Nothing I do is good enough, despite the fact that I have
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
multi-million-dollar company and we're worth more money than I'll ever do with. It's like it's never good enough for her." And it was just so funny that he's just like, I'm just tired of it. I'm just tired of the fact that like no matter what I do, it's not just appreciated. And
right.
that yeah, there is something to like with men where it's like you could tell it's not the same that say that we love us. Like me personally, I could tell you on like the back of my hand how many times I remember like being like starstruck over someone telling me they love me. But well, as far as like ex girlfriends go, but when a
Mm.
girlfriend said like, "You make me feel safe," I feel protected around you. I feel like I could let my guard down. Like that shit just melted me. So
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
personally, like
yeah.
yeah, some stories like that where like the instinct was like something crazy's happening. Look to me. I got you covered. I'm going to protect you. That just that just like amazing feeling. And I think it's a mismatch between like women want to feel seen and loved and men want to be appreciated and respected. And it's still kind of the same thing. It's just how you convey it in the context of the relationship or in the context of the household or whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Like men are wired to be protectors. As much as we want to say we don't need men and we don't need that protection, like that's the one thing that a woman needs from a guy is first safety so that she can be vulnerable with him and feel safe to communicate with them. And then just to touch on what you said too about men, like they want that validation in the way that when they do something, they just want the acknowledgement, like, hey,
Yeah.
I appreciated you doing that. Thanks. Like that was really great. Giving whether it be like taking out the garbage or, them buying getting flowers from the guy or whatever it may be. So yeah, all of those things are true. Like just because I hear a lot of men say, I don't feel like I have a role in that woman's life anymore. Because the women do go, and I hear women say, well, I ask him to do something, then he doesn't do it. So I just do it myself. So there's that piece too, where giving the man the opportunity to step in and not filling the gap for him, I think is really, really important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I'll put this out like women, I don't know if it has to do with IQ, but I know there's a lot of studies pointing that women have a higher IQ on average. And I think men in a nutshell are just like, we're just like golden retrievers. We're just like dogs. Just give us a job and something, just pay to pat us in the head and scratch our bellies and we're happy. I think I mentioned this before. There's another guy who was a podcaster and he was talking about this with his wife. He's married, he's got like 2 or 3 kids, married for a long time. And he gives like advice as to like how to be married, how to do this, how to be in a relationship. And he makes a point to say like, make sure your husband or your boyfriend or your spouse, whatever, he knows what it is that he does that you appreciate and just like reward him and whatever it is. Or if he does something that around the house or something he does that for whatever reason you find sexy and it's actually something you want him to keep doing, just fucking tell him. He will do that shit
Yeah,
every
yeah.
day. And he made a point about like he's like, for whatever reason, my wife thinks it's really sexy when I mow the lawn. He's like,
Hmm.
well, now I fucking love mowing the lawn. It's my favorite thing to do because it just makes me feel like I know she's appreciating me and finding some kind of like he's doing man shit, whatever it is, but he's making my property look clean. And that makes
Yeah.
me feel good to be with him, and that makes me attracted to him. And then he's going to start doing that. So when you start to reward the behavior you want to see, both ways, and even if it's with your girlfriend or wife or spouse or whoever it is,
Mm.
just start pointing out like, oh, I really like it when you dress your hair that way. I really like that fact that you like, you locked all the doors or you kept the bathroom clean or whatever. It seems like little things like you should just know. Why should I have to like praise you for all
Yeah.
this like a child? But at the same time, it's how you learn things. It's how you pick up a job. And like when you're working at a job, they're going to tell you what to do, and then when you do it correctly, they're going to say, "Good job. We appreciate you doing what you do," and you keep doing it. Why should
Yeah.
it be any different in a relationship?
Yeah. And it's funny how you said too, like, the whole guessing game thing, where it's like they should know. Because I coach with a guy, a male coach, and he always says, we want to know what it is that makes you happy. We don't want to guess. Just tell us what it is that makes you happy, because we actually do want to make you happy. We want to know what that is. And when you just expect us to know and then we don't do it, and then we ask you, oh, is something wrong? And you're like, no, nothing's wrong. But we know something's wrong. That's like one of the most frustrating things for men to navigate
Yeah.
with women. So it goes back to that communication piece, I think, where if people just communicated what their needs were and just had that conversation instead of assuming, then I think that would alleviate a lot of misunderstandings between couples or boyfriends, girlfriends, men, women, and this whole thing about like their side and our side, and us being more on, okay, well, how is this a win-win for both?
Yeah, yeah. I refer to it as like the communication gap. I had to find a way to like write it out on a board one of these days and take a picture. But it's like where the person is right now, where you want them to be, how
Mm-hmm.
far they'll get if you just let them try to figure it out. And then this is the part where you have to spell out any details you missed. And like this is the
Mm-hmm.
communication gap right in there. And what's very common with that is the mind reading fallacy.
Yeah.
Is the idea of just like, well, they should know. I shouldn't have to say something. And really what you're saying when you should say I shouldn't have to say something is my body is trying to have me avoid having a potentially uncomfortable conversation because I'm trying to avoid the potential emotional stress of being vulnerable in that moment to expose what's going on in my head or what's going on in
Yeah.
my mind or what's really
Yeah.
bothering me. And those are like the seeds of resentment and frustration. I think it's one of the four horsemen of divorce from the Gottman Institute. It's
Mm-hmm.
like content, defensiveness, criticism, and stonewalling. I think it is. And I think contempt is basically like you just start to hate the person because like they fucking left the toothbrush in the sink and didn't clean it up for the fifth time. Did you tell them?
Yeah.
I should have to tell them. It's disgusting. It might not be disgusting to him. I can guarantee. I'm willing to bet if you willing to bet if I took like 100 guys and 100 girls and they all lived by themselves and I just went into all 100 guys' apartments and all 100 girls' apartments, like more of the guys' apartments would be disgusting compared to most of the women's apartments
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
their level of disgust and what bothers them as far as cleanliness goes is just naturally, genetically, biologically way lower. So that when a woman walks in there and just feels like, oh my God, this is gross. And it's like, well, he doesn't know that because to him it's normal. Like, how could it be normal? Like,
Yeah.
because that's just how we're wired. We're wired very differently. And that, again, that gap is where you have to say, like, I like you, but this is gross. We need to clean it up. Okay, I'll clean it. Whatever you
Yeah.
want me to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And then not taking it for granted either, like not taking other people for granted. Like if you know that it bothers somebody to leave your toothbrush on the counter and they've asked you a million times not to do it, then just don't do it. Like it's, just make that effort to just put your toothbrush in the toothbrush holder or whatever it may be, and vice versa. If it bugs your spouse that you throw your clothes on the floor every day, just get like a friggin', basket or something and put it in there, or bring it down to the laundry room, whatever the case might be, because that is one of the things that starts to kind of corrode like relationships, is when
Mm-hmm.
you just take that other person for granted. But if you consider it, because when we get used to somebody and we get comfortable with them, then we start to do these things. We're just like, because we get really comfortable, right? It's just human nature. But that's sort of, we don't do it to somebody new. but then we do it to the person that we're supposed to love, and that we live with every day. And so that person starts to feel like, oh, they don't really care. Like, even if it's subconscious, they're just like, oh, like that's something that's important to me, but that person isn't viewing it as important anymore. And it goes both ways,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, because, yeah, like you said, to the guy, who cares if there's toothpaste on the counter? It's not the end of the world. But it's just in that moment where a woman, like, I'm going to speak from the woman's point of view, where it's important to her, and then maybe she's having a bad day, or she woke up and she's stressed out or tired, or she didn't sleep well, and then she sees that toothpaste on the counter again. Like, it could just be like, oh, I just want to kill him right now, right? Whereas another day, it might not bother her at all. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not going to be perfect. That's the thing. It's not going to be perfect. We have, which takes me to the whole, like, oh, the honeymoon phase, the Disney, like, fairy tale where people get together and it's just like, oh, we have the best life. He doesn't do anything irritating. She's lovely all the time. Like, that whole thing, like, that's just not even reality. You know,
Yeah.
we have to have those hard conversations.
Yeah.
And there's going to be
Conflict
times where
and
we're irritating each other and maybe we're not going to talk to each other, or somebody has to leave and go for a walk, or whatever the case might be. But that's a relationship. That's what a relationship really looks like. And I feel like, going back to the beginning of the whole conversation about effort, if you're not willing to put effort into a relationship, then you got to check yourself right there, right at the beginning.
Yeah, I had somebody in my life, I think it was like a cousin or someone who said something along those lines, like, if relationships are effort, then they're not worth it. It's like, no, relationships are effort and they're worth it. And
Yeah, yeah.
people,
Anything hard we have to work for. Like, that's so true. Like, we
yeah,
don't appreciate the things that come easily to us. It's just human nature. Like, the more that I talk to people, the more that I realize that it's like, yeah, if you're not willing to work for it, then it's not going to be as fulfilling for you. And I think that's part of the reason that online dating is failing.
yeah, it's a path of least resistance with online dating, with way
Hmm.
more resistance on the other side than you think. Because the problem is that there is, I mean, this is what I'm just speculating on top of my head. Online dating in general is a certain amount of work that goes into it. You have to, like,
Hmm.
put yourself together, be well spoken, try to be educated, have a job, put a little, and then just practice and just figure out what works and what doesn't work, and who you are and what you want and what you don't want.
Hmm.
And online dating just turns it into like a all you can eat buffet where you can pick and choose exactly what you want to put on your plate. Sometimes you might get a plate at a restaurant. It's like, well, this is steak and it comes with a side of broccoli. Like, I don't like broccoli, but I like steak. It's like, well, this guy comes with broccoli. This girl comes with broccoli. It's just how it is. You
Yeah.
got to just learn to just deal with it. Whereas online dating, it gives you the impression of thinking, oh, I can just, like, I could scroll the broccoli meter down to 0 and I could scroll the steak up to 100. This is great.
Hmm.
But it really doesn't take into account the fact that we find interest in each other through very different ways. Online dating tries to reduce the amount of time needed to, like, find somebody, but you still need a certain amount of time to build up an interest in that person. And generally speaking, like, when I hear people say, like, well, I'm looking for my soulmate, or maybe they've met somebody, like, they found my soulmate, like, it just so happens that your soulmate was born in the same town. What a coincidence. All over the world, the person could have lived and existed, but they happen to be, but it's just no, because you spent enough time around the person. You got to know
Hmm.
them. You see them in activities together. Maybe your families know each other. Your friends know each other. That was generally the vetting process you'd go through. Like, I had to be a good person, put myself out there in proximity to other people in a social environment so other people could see me. And then when they see somebody else, maybe they can pair us up. Maybe we see each other. Maybe we have a conversation. We have similar interests. And then from there, you start to kind of develop you've heard of people who say proximity interest, where it's
Yeah.
like, I started working this new job and suddenly I caught an interest in my new coworker because I've just been
Hmm.
around them enough. And then they left the company, I lost interest. It's like, yeah, because you're
Right.
literally physically around them enough so that you're able to just, like, get your body and your brain to start, like, kind of noticing every little thing about them and just kind of just generating an idea about the person to then take the chance, go on a date, grab some coffee, see how it goes, and then working
Hmm.
through that. But online dating gives you the impression, it gives women the impression, from my understanding, just from the statistics behind it, that they have infinite options. And extends their time horizon of how long they think they can just jump into the dating market and just go. I'm curious to see, like, if there's any statistics about the preferences on women's profiles as they get older. I'd be curious to see if it's like when they're younger, they're like, oh, like I know exactly what I want for, and as they get older and they kind of get like slowly, for lack of a better words, like aging out of the dating pool, they start to become more and more, less and less strict about what they're looking for. Maybe they double down. I'm not really sure, but yeah, it kind of throws a wrench into the old traditional ways of courtship and how we used to find each other.
Hmm. Hmm.
And people
Hmm.
just don't like understand how to do it. Because on the online dating app, you might see a person like, oh, 6 foot tall guy, looks good, has an awesome job. He must be a great person because of these
On
attributes that I
paper.
attributed to him
Yeah.
in my filter. And then when you meet him in person, he's actually kind of a douchebag. But your brain's like, but he's supposed to be a good person because he's attractive and he's 6 foot and he meets these criteria that I was looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's good on paper, but then you meet them. Like, well, how many people do you get along with great online, or you're texting them or whatever, and then you meet them and it's just like absolutely no. Like I've heard a lot of people say that. Like, they're just like, oh, this guy's so funny and he tells funny jokes, and then they go on a date and then they're like, oh, yeah, no, he's totally different in person. Couldn't hold a conversation. Wasn't interesting. Wasn't engaging. Just didn't like his energy. Yeah. So it's to me, it's about the energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of times, it's about the energy. Like I don't know. I don't know about you, Michael, but like I don't know if sometimes you'll be talking to somebody who, when you first initially started talking to them, maybe you're not physically attracted to them, but then as you talk to them, conversation goes a certain way, and goes to a certain depth that's really intriguing to you, and you start to see that person as more attractive. Whereas you might see an attractive girl, I don't know, guys, but with women, and then he could say like a couple sentences, and the woman's instantly like, no, he's a no, like just
Repulsed.
turned off, repulsed, like this guy, like he's not a classy guy, like he made me feel a certain way, I got the ick, whatever it might be, and it just changes. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's common with men too. And I think this is a problem that we're seeing nowadays with things like pornography, for example, or
Hmm.
we'll say like thirst traps online, or a lot of guys will just there's no shortage of content out there of guys or people out there just trying to put themselves, women in particular, but I mean porn and whatnot, that it gives this impression of what people should look like
Hmm.
or like what you should be looking for. You should be going for the 10 out of 10, like holy crap supermodel who also wants to be like a wifely lady who wants to have a kids and just bang you every day and make you breakfast in bed. It's that if you don't go anything short of that, you're wasting your time. And it's like in reality, odds are you're going to meet the person that, like, even for me, I remember my last girlfriend. She said this to me. I remember when she first met me. She said it was kind of like a slow burn in the beginning. But then once like I saw you weren't crazy, you were well spoken, you had you were clean, you were nice, you were friendly, you took care of me, and then you got really fucking hot as time went on. But a lot of people
Mm.
don't. People will jump after the first hot attributes first, thinking that's what's going to make them happy, only to find out this person has no personality, or they're a complete asshole, a narcissist, a borderline personality, whatever it is. That they're mistaking like the attributes, physical attributes, for internal attributes, and
Hmm.
thinking the person that doesn't have that same level. It's like the girl who, for a guy, because men are very physically, visually oriented. It's like I'd be willing to bet if you went back in time for me like 15 years ago, 20 years ago when I was still like a teenager, and showed me pictures of all the girlfriends I would have had, I would have been like, maybe, I don't know. But at the time, it was just like all I could think about is just like boobs and butts and just like awesome looking girl. Because at that age, like your testosterone, you have no idea what's going on. But you don't understand the other aspect of like, no, it's like like their physical attractiveness will go up with their personality when you get to know them. But I've had
Hmm.
like ex girlfriends that, like, looking back, not as attractive as I thought they were, but at the time they were fucking amazing. But then when things
Right.
blew up, now looking
Right.
back, like, no, like, they were okay, good looking, I guess. At the same time, sure, the exact same thing of me. When they look at me at the time, I was the hottest piece of ass in the market, and then when things blew up, like he looks like crap. He's a total scumbag. Screw him. But that's just telling you that your internal environment is just basically your brain. I'm losing my track of that. I have a missed call from somebody. Hold on one second.
Yeah, and also I think we talk about like a lot about how the feeling, how people feel, or how a guy makes a woman feel. which is really a big thing too.
Okay, makes women feel okay. Well, what do you?
Yeah,
That could be a tough one because I think,
especially the feeling of safety. Like as soon
yeah,
as a woman, if a guy says something that makes a woman feel like not safe, that guy can instantly become unattractive to a woman. And it's not just about the looks. It's about the whole thing. And yeah, and then to get that to back to that piece of safety for her, then I think there has to be like some kind of conversation. There has to be like a change in behavior of some sort. But if that behavior continues over time, I think that that relationship chances of being successful is going to be low, or at least being healthy.
yeah, I've heard like safety, trust, respect. Safety is a big one
Mm-hmm.
for women and guys. I think they don't realize how potentially scary they can be
Mm-hmm.
in a way. Hold on.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that was just thinking about this, and I'm not saying this to be mean, maybe a little bit. Uh, I was driving home
How dare
today.
you?
There was a festival fair going on somewhere in the town that I work, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of police cars nearby, just kind of keeping an eye out for things. And I happened to see some cops walking together, and one of them was like a petite, like female cop, small woman. I'm sure maybe
Okay.
she's a great aim, good shooter. Maybe she knows the martial arts, but I just my first thought crossed my mind like I've never gotten into a fight in my entire life. I've never punched a person in the face. I'm just not like a very aggressive dude.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at her, I was like, but I feel like if for whatever reason at all, a guy my size decided to just like take her on physically, one punch and she's done. She's out because there's a strength difference. There's a strength gap there
Mm-hmm.
physically that like a guy like I'm 6 foot, I'm pretty built, and then she was just like petite and skinny and just like I can understand the idea of like a guy like me walking up to her and her feeling a little bit of like, oh, what's going on? Or some kind of, if I was perceived to be at all threatening in any regard, or things I was saying, or the way I was acting, that's just going to set off like massive alarm bells in her head. Whereas her coworker, guy's like another like 6'1" muscle bound jack dude, he's like, I can take this guy. I'm not fucking scared of him because I could see there's like a physical, you know, relationship, physical matching going on there. But
Mm-hmm.
in most women's cases, guys don't recognize this. Safety is, yeah, safety comes down to like multiple layers, in my opinion. It's like I want to feel safe around you by knowing that you are contained within yourself. Like your outside matches your inside, matches your words, matches your mannerisms. Like when your eyes and your body and your words and your language and your energy doesn't line up. This is that word again, energy. We'll touch on in a second. But if I pick up on anything in your body language that suggests you're being a little bit too aggressive, or you can't keep your hands to yourself, or you like I kind of give you a gesture of like backing away and you leaned in closer, whatever it was, like, and you're just not picking up on the fact that like I'm feeling a little bit overstimulated right now. You don't feel safe next to this guy because it feels like this guy can't control his impulses, can't control his body, whatever's going on. I
Mm-hmm.
think Connor Beaton, the Man Talks guy, he was talking about this like sexually disciplined men are
Yeah.
really, really attractive because it's like we know you have a very, very, very strong sexual drive going on in the back of that head, guy. But if you can keep it under control, it's appreciated. It's a sign of discipline that like you could do damage and you don't. You could put a
Right.
hole in the wall and you don't. You could do this and you don't. And signaling that to women, in my opinion, is a matter of just the fact that you're not giving off many signs of inability to control your impulses. Like if you see a really attractive woman, you're not staring at her like a creep. You're not like ogling her. You're not getting a little bit too close to her when you want to talk to her. You're respecting if she's not interested in the conversation, whatever it may be. But and then in the context of the relationship, like your words match your actions, match your behavior. You don't explode randomly. You have emotional control. If you get stressed out, you don't take it out on her or take it on somebody else. You
Mm-hmm.
don't like lose your shit. And that in itself can lead to a lot of good or bad things in a relationship, depending on how you decide to swing that one. If you're actually able to control yourself, able to control your anger, able to control your emotions, your impulses, whatever it is, and shows up for like a sign of like a lot of safety to women. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that is one of the things that is debated like constantly between men and women, the whole physical thing. And how many men do you actually think, though, are conscious of when they go on a date? Because the male coach that I coach with says even good men and men who have good intentions will always push that physical boundary. If they're on a date, like say with a woman who they're attracted to, they will always attempt to push the physical in the way that they'll test it to see if the woman will respond. And now, from a woman's point of view, they'll put guys in categories. So a high quality, let's just call him high quality guy senses that if he does test in whatever way he tests, whether it be he lean in for a kiss or he goes to grab her hand and then she pulls it away, he'll clue in and be like, okay, she's not ready for that. And he'll respect that and continue the day. Where some guys will be in the category of maybe they'll get offended by that or they'll feel rejected by that, depending on where they are in their work and how they interpret that. So there's like a lot of like kind of like undertones there. And so it goes back to, and when you're just like first getting to know somebody and you're not comfortable with them, you don't know the way they do things. It goes back to how far into the communication do you go with that person to let them know that it's like, okay, on a first date, like, because we always encourage women to say, I don't kiss on a first date. I just don't. That's a rule that I have.
Yeah.
So then we also say to women, if you're going to state that, just remember that if you get attracted to the guy by the end of the date, that you stick to what you said. Because if you don't and you cross that line, then that guy's going to interpret that, well, she told me this, but she did this. So what she's saying isn't aligning with her actions, which is also what we tell the women that we coach. Always look for the actions, that the words match with the actions.
Yes.
So if he's telling you one thing, but he's acting a different way, then that is something to yellow flag or red flag, or something to at least bring up, or something to take note of moving forward. It doesn't mean you have to completely close that guy off after the first date, depending on what it was. But it's just something that if you took note of, just take a note if that happens again. Or if you address it with him, did he continue to do it? Because then that will give you the information that you need to know to see if you want to move on with that man and continue that, getting to know him, continue that relationship, that connection, or if it's a no for you.
I just saw a video the other day, and it was it's a confusing dance, I think, for men and women, because you are both walking a tightrope in the relationship, trying to get to like more stable ground on the other side of a long-term committed relationship where communication is very open. And it reminded me of this video the other day, and it was this guy who was talking. He was showing like a video of the perspective was like in a bedroom. It was a woman walking into the bedroom, and she looked like she had just like, just general comfy at home clothes on. And the guy was like behind the door, and it was her boyfriend. And she walks in, and she turns around and sees him, and she's like, what are you doing? And he just like kind of like spins her around and pushes her on the bed. He's like, ooh, what's going on here? And then he sits down, and he pushes her off to the side, and he like picks up the remote control, and he's like, you were on the remote. And you could see she was like, like that would have been so sexy if you just like threw me in the bed and just ravished me. And then the guy was like narrating the video. He was like, see, women want guys to do this. I'm like, yeah, in committed relationships with people that they trust and feel safe with and respect. It's like, yeah, there's a part of you I want to see that like you like. It's like if you're going on a date, I want to see that you can keep your hands to yourself. I want to see that you can keep like focus on a conversation. Like I know sex monkey is going crazy in the back of your brain right now, but can you keep him under control? Like, could you have an ability to like handle him? Such that maybe later on, when I see you're well disciplined, your words match your actions, all this stuff. Like, you know what? Later on, maybe date 3, 4, 5. Let's go nuts with Sex Monkey. It's gonna be great. Let's have fun. But prove to me first that you actually have your own impulses under control and you're not a fucking psycho. And so, yeah, I could see that like where they'll say like, I don't kiss on the first date, and some guys will hear that and think like, oh, it sounds like a challenge. Maybe I'll be the one to break that that barrier.
That's a good point.
But it's a good idea, I think, for women to do that if they want to do that, to kind of say like, I don't kiss on the first date, and if they try immediately, I know this guy likes to push boundaries, and it's not healthy. I don't want to be with this guy.
Yeah,
versus the guy who like, or maybe you say that, and then at the end of the first date, you kiss him, and you go, I know I said at the beginning, I normally don't, but I actually really like you. But whatever it may be, but like opening that communication line to kind of say how I feel, if I feel comfortable with it. But yeah, it's 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 tough because you don't want to be too standoffish. 'Cause it reminds me of a Louis C.K. comedian.
Hmm.
He's talking about this, about how he was on. He went. I think he went out with a girl. He was working at a comedy club. One of the waitresses thought he was cute. Started talking. They go back to his place. They're getting a little bit. No, they're making out. They're getting a little frisky, and he goes to kind of like make an extra move, and she kind of stops him. He's like, "Okay, I guess she doesn't want to do anything else." I think he tried something else, and she stops him. He's like, "Okay, okay, I hear you loud and clear. We're just gonna make out tonight. Call it a night. No big deal. Whatever." And then he goes home, and the next day he's in the comedy club again. And she comes up to him and she's like, "Hey, what happened last night?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Why didn't we have sex?" He's like, "You stopped me twice." She's like, "Well, I know, but I like it. Like I was really into it. I was ready to do it." And he's like, "You stopped me twice. What are you talking about?" She's like, "Well, I just like it when guys just like just ignore it, just throw me to the bed and just me anyway." And he's like, "I'm not gonna rape you on the off chance that you're okay with it. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?"
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so maybe there are people
That's
like
too
that out
much.
there. That's too much. But the
Yeah.
idea of like, I want to see some assertiveness, but I think guys going to demonstrate assertiveness in other ways. Like
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
saying like they're gonna pick the place and we're gonna go and do a thing. Oh, that looks interesting over there. Let's go check this out. Let's go do things thing over here. Like kind of
Yeah.
like leading with leading with like a option to follow. Not saying we're doing this. You're following me over here. We're going over here. I want to do
Yeah.
this. Like, oh, that
Yeah.
looks interesting. Would you want to check that out? I'm kind of interested. Let's go. And she's like, okay, let's go check it out. And it's kind of like this soft, gentle kind of like guiding of like curiosity, a little bit of assertiveness, but not dominating. Like soft
Yeah.
dominance, if you want to even call it even that. But recognizing, and the big thing with guys, you mentioned energy before. I wanted to get to that point. I think a
Hmm.
lot of guys are not aware of themselves. People in general, I'm sure women too, but guys in particular, because I've done this a lot. They don't hear themselves. They don't recognize. They're not aware of what they're portraying as when they're next to somebody. Like I personally, especially since I do massage therapy, I do a lot to make sure, like if I'm working on one particular part of the body,
Hmm.
say for example, I'm working on like the low back into the glute area. My other hand will be sitting on like their calf. So it's like leg, well, like low back here, calf here, basically saying like my hand's not doing anything weird. It's on your body right now. Because there's things I could be doing with my hand right now if you didn't feel it. So both hands generally stay on the body at all times, if not like very brief jumps to go to certain areas to do things. And really being able
Hmm.
to read a person's tone of voice, energy, body language, especially if it's like a woman, it's the first time they're ever seeing me. I make
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
extreme effort to not be creepy in any capacity whatsoever. Let them talk, let them tell me where their boundaries are as far as what they want to talk about, and then just let the conversation go there.
Yeah.
And then as time goes on, they might tell me more and more deep stuff once they get comfortable, but I'll never assume they're okay with like every conversation day one. I take it like every new patient is almost like a first date for me. But yeah, I think a lot of
That's a good
guys
way of
are
looking at
just
it.
yeah, I think a lot of guys don't realize like you might come off as intensive or you might come off as something like I said, actions are not matching words or like what I see sometimes with some guys. It's like if you drank a shitload of caffeine and your thoughts are just running 200 miles an hour and
Hmm.
you're constantly looking around thinking of things, trying to like constantly changing things and whatnot. Like that comes across as like, whoa, something's off
Yeah.
with you right now.
Yeah.
And if you're on a first date or something like that, or dating somebody early on, if you're very nervous, there's a difference between I'm anxious and nervous because you're really attractive and I don't want to screw this up. And there's also a difference between like something is like not lining up with your behavior and I can smell it, I can see it, I can kind of
Yeah.
feel it in
Yeah.
the air.
Yeah. And that's where we go into the woman's intuition.
Hmm.
It's a real thing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I
Oh,
mean, I
yeah.
speak personally from my own, experiences where I've had like intuitive hits about people, but I'm also like a people pleaser, or I don't want to be mean or hurt somebody's feelings. So I kind of ignore it, or I tell myself, like I go into judgment of myself and say, oh, it's just me, like thinking something that's not really there. And maybe I'm being a little paranoid or overly sensitive. And then down the road, things have happened where it's like you go back to that first hit that you got and you were like, I know why I had that. So learning to trust that. So I was coaching women like, listen to your intuition. You don't have to freak out about it, but don't ignore it either. Like pay attention to it and just be like, okay, what's coming up for me right now? Like what's going on in this moment that happened that made me feel a certain way in my gut or in my throat or in my heart or whatever it might be. And so it's important to do that as well as and I know I'm probably like could get in trouble for saying this, like as far as like feminists or women, like about the whole, going back to that lady who's said to the guy, like, why didn't we have sex? It's very important to be careful of confusing a guy, because it's
Yes.
that sensitive territory of where we go back to feeling safe with a guy, but then also not giving the wrong signals to men either, because we have to be fair to them as well. Because while they're going through their whole like, does she like me? Does she not like me? Can I hold her hand? Can I kiss her? Is it safe to do this? Am I going to turn her off? Am I going to like make her feel a certain way? If you're giving them mixed signals, you're just adding to a lot more of that confusion and things like that at the beginning when you're just learning about each other. When you're in a like more established relationship down the road, like into 3 months, 6 months, a year, if you want to go into like, some of the more, stuff that's not considered basic or normal, then you can establish those roles and be really communicative. But then you also have like a foundation of how that person operates. And you already have a, a large sense of what is okay with that person and what isn't, because you've worked in establishing that and getting to know each other. So, and then there's the whole piece about like when women go on dates, like what they're wearing and all of that kind of stuff. And there's the two camps of like, okay, well, if you don't want to be sexualized, don't wear certain outfits. And then other women saying,
We
well,
should be
I
able
want
to
to
wear
be an
that.
empowered woman and I should be able to
Yeah.
wear whatever I want. And that doesn't give an excuse a guy to treat me a certain way. But let's be honest, like men are visual, and we're still as a society, those things are still things that um, haven't really been worked out in a way where we can just make those assumptions. I think whenever you go into assumptions, you're going into a territory where you could get into like dangers, like kind of a hard word, like too harsh of a word, but where you could pro- probably offend somebody. So it's good to just check in with yourself and be, like you said, learn self awareness.
I see this a lot at the gym now with young girls just wearing I heard this described very well of like some women don't understand the blast radius on what they're wearing is, like how many eyes they're really picking up.
Mm-hmm.
And you think you enjoy the attention, but the problem is, and people are kind of conflated, is like you're hoping to get the attention from the guy you're interested in, but you're getting the attention from every guy in the area, every single one. And especially at the gym nowadays, it's like tighter and tighter and tighter Lululemon like booty shorts and just ridiculous. This one made me laugh. A couple of days ago, I had a buddy who might point out to me. There's a couple of channels on YouTube, and I guess what they're trying to do is really push the like rules and regulations to their limits, and also just get free attention and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like these women who are like, the channel is like how to clean while body painted. And it's quite literally like women with body
Mm-hmm.
paint on. So they're basically naked, but I guess the visual algorithm can't pick up that there's literal nudity going on. And they're like, "Oh, this is how you clean the floor with my ass at the camera, and look at my boobs over here. I'm watching this thing." And it's literally like just straight up like porn on YouTube, but because
Mm-hmm.
it's technically not listed as that. It's listed as like how to clean your house while wearing body paint. And what made me laugh was like I had to look into it because I jumped into like what you could look into see when the channel was created, and some of these channels were made like 3 months ago, and they've already crossed like 200,000 subscribers. I've had my podcast for like 6 months, and I just crossed 30. So the idea
Yeah,
is
well,
like,
we know
yeah,
how
like
that goes.
like, well, are men visual? Yeah, fuck yeah, they're like, look,
Yeah,
just seeing this over there. But seeing that there's this weird optimization that goes on for men and women, where it's like, for women in particular, it's like, I want to be attractive enough to attract high quality guys while not having to deal with the not high quality guys if I can help it. So if I become super modest and super prude in the way I dress and super covered up, no one's going to want to talk to me. But if I dress really sexy, everybody's going to want to talk to me. So like, where's the happy middle ground? Like, it's hard to say, and I don't think there's any way you really get away with like dressing like that without causing some degree of just visual, just parts of a guy's brain. It fires off in ways that you can't control. Like, I'm 35 now, but when I go to the gym, I can look around and see like, there's a small part of me that's like, I like what I see. And the part of me is just like, this is really inappropriate. I feel like this is but like, if it was me 15 years ago, I wouldn't be able to work out. I would just be like drooling the entire time.
right, right,
And like understanding like at that age, when you have that much testosterone, really like 21-year-old me, just got ungodly amounts of testosterone flowing through me, I would not be able to. I'd have to go to a different gym. I wouldn't fucking get any workouts done.
right. Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say, it all depends on like who's looking at what lens you're looking through as well. Like versus 22 versus when you're 32 versus when you're 42, whether you're in a relationship or not. Like, what kind of self-discipline you have. Like, there's all of those factors involved. But then there's also going back to like that energy too. And if you're, I hate saying like if you're a good looking woman because like I know women get triggered by like, oh guys, like in society, like there's a certain look of a guy, like tall, dark, and handsome, 6 feet. Like that's what women are attracted to, but not all women are attracted to that. And then
Mm-hmm.
same with the women, like they like the blonde Barbie doll look, but then you talk to a lot of guys, they like brunettes. So there's that whole thing. And just what I think people just get into this thing about like if I'm a good looking woman, then they get frustrated if guys are looking at them or certain guys are looking at them, like you said.
Yeah.
But if you are a woman who dresses up nicely and presents herself a certain way and you're reasonably good looking, then you're gonna attract men. But you're not, like you said, you're not just gonna attract the ones that you want. Like all kinds of men are going to be magnetized to you. But the part that's empowering as a woman is having clarity around who you want to attract. And then when you talk to them, being able to know, because you have that clarity, which ones you want to keep in your circle and which ones you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Like, because you're not obligated to any of them if you don't want to be. But just know and don't get triggered by the fact that if you get certain attention, it's not a negative.
yeah. Don't get triggered as
And
a
then
tall
that
ask.
line of like, if a guy's approaching you and being rude, of course you just tell him like, I'm not interested in like the way that you're talking to me or whatever it may be. And always be like, you know, in your integrity about it. Like you don't have to be, a bitch or, cause a scene or anything like that. You can be classy and polite about it and just be like, I appreciate the way you're talking to me, or that's not what I'm looking for. I'm going to walk away now. Like, just walk away. But if another guy approaches you and it's like an interesting conversation or you're intrigued by it and you can stay, like, that's where you have a choice. And it's the same with men. Men have that choice too. So we don't have to make it this thing where it's just like, because I've seen women who are relatively good looking and be frustrated and just be like, I'm just tired of all these guys coming up to me. And it's like, but why? But why? Like there's married women too who are super attractive and get approached all the time as well. And even when they say that they're married, the guy doesn't care. Like he's just like, oh, that doesn't matter to me. Like, and then I've had that experience too where you're just like, well, it kind of matters to me and it probably matters to my husband. Right. So yeah, it's part of life. you know?
Yes. Yeah. I think what we're making the mistake in the modern age of is trying to act like biology doesn't exist in some
Hmm.
ways.
Hmm.
And part of that biology is the fact that we are attracted to certain things and different things in each other, male to female, female to male, or vice versa, or any mixed match of that. I'm sure historically there's a lot of different ways we would have gone about trying to keep those like crappy suitors at bay. And now I wonder if some degree, like, yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on where you go and what you're doing. Because if you're going out clubbing and you're getting hit on constantly, you kind of asked for it in a way. Like, depending on the environment that you're in. If you were at a church and every single guy was approaching you nonstop, that might be a bit of a weird thing that was happening. But you're less likely to be in that environment having that experience. And I think what people make the mistake of thinking is like, I should be able to like have my cake and eat it too. I should be able to get attention, but not be bothered when I don't want to be. It's like you need to put like a sign on your back that says like, "Don't talk to me," but also I'm hot or something like that. This was an interesting thing. I remember hearing this perspective about OnlyFans. Familiar with that? Sounds
What's
like
it
you are.
called?
OnlyFans?
OnlyFans.
You never heard of that?
No.
Oh my god, I wish I was you. Like I wish I lived. It's yeah. So OnlyFans is this? It's like this multi-billion-dollar website where basically it's almost like HBO porn on demand. Some more pay-per-view porn, in that there's literally women that will go like on camera, and you can like pay money to the person to do things on camera in real time. So it's like
Mm,
only your fans are watching OnlyFans. It's
okay.
abbreviated to OF.
I kind of figured that's where you're gonna go with it.
Yeah, it's basically like live cam, live shows, things like that on the internet. And there's an interesting perspective to say like generally speaking, men trade resources for sexual access and women trade sexual access for resources. Nowadays, not so much. It's a bit of a different situation. But historically, it's kind of how we biologically evolved. And somebody made a point about how, like, with OnlyFans, like, now women can, like, for the first time in human history, women can extract financial resources from men and potential men or potential anyone who is watching without having to risk the encounter itself. So it's like now you can get
Yeah.
attention. Like Instagram does the same thing. It's like you can get the attention you want without having to be physically there and feel good about yourself and do all this stuff. And I think like it's I guess it's a bit of a tie-in to what we're talking about with women who are frustrated by the people approaching them. But it's like this is exactly what it's in a weird way. You'd be more pissed off if people weren't approaching you. Because part of your brain would go like, "What's wrong with you? Why aren't any guys talking to me? I'm so used to this," or like
Yeah.
it feels good in certain ways. So it's almost like a small price to pay having to tell guys to piss off I'm married or I'm not. I'm like my husband's gonna be really pissed if he hears about it. But
Hmm.
what's funny within that though too is that I remember hearing this theory about like guys and the overactive smoke alarm,
Hmm.
where it's like we've kind of evolved to over assume you're giving us signs because women have kind of evolved to try to like push the signs down as much as possible
Yeah.
where possible. And so the guy has to makes the assumption like, well, I'm married. It's like, well, maybe she's lying to me, or maybe she's not. Maybe she's married, but she's really unhappy with her husband, or maybe she
Hmm.
is married, whatever. And she's like, she's close to getting divorced, or whatever it may be. And you get these guys who are just like more than willing to kind of push that envelope, push that envelope, push that envelope, just with the hopes that you keep doing enough, eventually someone's going to say yes.
Yeah. Taking their chances. Yeah. I know. Well, it's learning social cues as well. Like, you know,
Oh God,
if
yeah.
if you're if you're like making eye contact with a guy, like he's gonna take that as you're interested in him. That's just like a basic thing because they're gonna approach you eventually if they really are interested in you. If you're interested in you, if you're giving them the eye contact. But I heard that one of the scariest things for guys to do is actually approach a woman.
Oh
So
yeah,
a lot of times
yeah.
they won't, and the woman will say, "Well, if he really liked me, he would come over." Whether they be like, in a club or a coffee shop or whatever the case might be.
I have to give credit to my last girlfriend and probably a few other girlfriends prior where they approached me. It was a nice change of pace, especially
Yeah.
nowadays with like I think like post Me Too and things like that. Guys, post Me Too, and I would wager there is a collective frustration among guys who are picking up on other guys' frustration about the dating scene without actually going out there themselves. like if I was a younger guy and I went online and said, how do I, approach a girl and pick up girls, and every single forum and article I read was like, don't even bother. Women's standards are too high. Nobody wants to date. They're just like, all they want is a 6 foot guy who makes $6 million a year. And it's not even, just don't even fucking bother. You'd almost got like, you'd almost feel rejected before you even tried, just by hearing that and seeing that and looking around. And I think a lot of guys nowadays are just getting a little burnt out from the approach. For a lot of guys too was like dating apps. And we mentioned before, the dating apps. One thing was interesting learning about dating apps was something they do called seeding, where have you heard of this? Basically, they put like fake profiles on there.
Yeah.
So when you first, as a guy, when you first join, you'll think you're getting hits when you're really not. And
Right.
it kind of bolsters your excitement, thinking I should stay in a little longer. In reality, like it's all just bullshit. It's not actually a thing. But yeah, I think tying back to what we said earlier is that like there is a certain price to be paid to get what you want in a relationship through, like, going the approach, learning to be rejected, learning what works, learning what doesn't work. That every guy kind of has to go through. Like, I guess historically we didn't have to worry about as much because most marriages were like heavily arranged marriages or just people you knew in your local town. But now, like, guys aren't approaching as much as they used to be. Women, because of dating apps and other things, might have higher standards than they used to have. A lot of guys are falling behind financially. Uh, yeah, there's a lot of terror involved in an approach, just because there is this fear of like, well, what if she says no? Because your brain's really freaking good at creating fantasies at like
Hmm.
what's going to happen. I'm going to walk up to her. She's going to say, "Hey, how's it going? My name is so and so," and we're going to start talking. I'm going to make her laugh, have a good conversation. She's going to give me my phone number. It's going to be a great day. And she's going to call me the next day. I'm going to go on a second date, and it's just all that. And then you walk up there, and she's like, "Not interested," and then whole fantasy just collapses immediately, and you just feel like shit. But ideally, what I think a lot of guys end up doing is just learning to just approach like over and over and over and over and over and over again, and eventually you stop caring about the rejection. You just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good way to be, but I don't know how many guys are actually in that place where they're okay with just approaching over and over and over and over again. But a
Yeah,
woman can definitely know and let a guy know that she's interested in it and that it is safe to approach her if she knows what those things are to do, like, smiling at them, eye contact. If you're with a group of women, the likelihood of them approaching is going to be really, really low and not pretty much non-existent. So position yourself where he can approach you without being rejected in front of a group if he thinks he's going to get rejected.
yeah. Well, the challenge there too is like approach a group of women, pick one out that you like, approach her, and then all of a sudden every other woman there, if they happen to be interested in this guy, is now pissed off at her and you that they didn't get approached to.
Yeah. Well, too bad. I say to those people, like, I don't know. It's interesting territory because even if you're a female sometimes and you're just friendly, guys will get the wrong impression. So
Mm,
you do have to adjust. Like you do. Like I'm like a pretty outgoing, friendly person. So when I'm out, if I'm with a group, like I'm engaging to all people because you don't want to be that person either that guys are just like, oh, she's too snobby, she's not going to talk to me. Like I go into a kind of like a mind frame that it's like, okay, don't look at these people as male or female, just look at them as people. And so that can go into a place where a guy will get a certain impression of you, but then you just adjust. If you feel like all of a sudden he's going into a place where he feels like you're talking to him because you're interested in him, you can redirect that conversation to, just by using your common sense. You don't have to go into like playing games or you don't have to know a certain line because I know like there's a lot of coaches out there who teach that kind of thing. But just use common sense and just be like, well, I just wanted to have a chat or, I'm here with my girlfriends just having a good time. And then don't stay too long in that conversation either. Like move away from it and just say, I just want to say hi. Like I'm just, kind of saying hi to everybody or, you know, there's certain things that you can do. And then if that person gets the wrong impression, like you can only control so many things. You can't control how someone else is feeling. You can only control yourself. So if you think that you've stayed in your integrity and that you weren't doing anything to make that person think a certain way, well then you just gotta like trust in that. You trust yourself and where your boundaries are and how much, you know, you put yourself out there. And when you put yourself out a little bit more because you are showing somebody that you are interested in them, which isn't always going to get them interested in you. Like,
Yep.
so yeah, nobody owes anybody anything at that stage of the game.
Curious, you mentioned earlier about intuition, reading signs, things like that.
Mhm.
Have you ever worked with women who have some degree of, we'll say, trauma, that their
Mm,
intuition signals are way off?
definitely. Yeah.
And how do you go about like going to like that guy definitely was like trying to follow him or do something, or he was being a creep, like he just asked for your name and your number, but like the reaction was just. I'm sure guys do the same thing in certain capacities, but
Yeah.
wondering like where the
Yeah.
line between intuition and like false signals in your brain from past experiences starts to set off
Yeah.
alarms.
Yeah. Well, that's where the coaching will come in because you're going to have to go a little bit deeper with that person, like to like ask some questions like, well, why were you getting that impression? And okay, so why did you interpret it that way? And then based on their answers, being able to give them reflection or feedback on, okay, well, that guy was just asking for your number or he said something a certain way, but does that mean like sit with that and see, okay, was his action actually something wrong? Was he offensive? Did he say something that was offensive? Was he saying something normal and you're just having like a certain feeling about it because it's making you think of or reminding you of somebody who did end up being somebody who wasn't a favorable person to you? Or is is it that you are just feeling uncomfortable because it's something around triggering something that you've experienced in the past? It's not good for
Mm-hmm.
you. Or do you just not like this person? Or are you reading into something? A lot of women read into things as well. Like they go into their logical mind and they start dissecting everything the guy does. Like, well, he sent me 2 texts today, but he didn't send me any today. And then I haven't, and then all of a sudden he was texting me all day on Thursday, and then on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I didn't hear from him. And they start processing that and start like putting so much weight on all of that stuff, where it's just like you can't do that. Like when you don't know somebody, you can't do that. Like you can't internalize that and look at that as rejection. Like why are you taking that as rejection, or why are you making a text from somebody um have so much weight on it, and you're looking for that validation. And so I always encourage women to go back to themselves, like go back to yourself and then take the focus off of him and what he's doing and bring the focus back to you on what's going on with you
Mm-hmm.
and why are these things coming up for you, and then
Yeah,
working with that.
there's a good
Because somebody
commercial
who's
I've
in their
seen.
secure, they're not going to be affected by that.
Yeah, yeah. There's a good commercial I remember seeing that was like it was a guy at a date with some woman and he dropped so I think he dropped the fork on the ground, but she didn't see it. And he kneels down, and as soon as he kneels, all of a sudden her brain goes to an ultra fantasy, like kneeling, he's gonna
Hmm.
propose, we're gonna get married, we're gonna have kids, we're gonna buy a house. Oh my god, this is gonna be amazing. And he's like, oh, drop fork, and it just gets right back up again. And yeah, it's along those lines of like your brain is really good at trying to map out possible future pathways of what could happen moment to moment or what's happening or trying to solve the puzzle, the pattern that you see in front of you. You texted me twice today and twice the day before, but only once today. 221. What's going on? There must be something wrong. Maybe he's mad at me. And it's looking for patterns. It's trying to combine information in your subconscious in ways to try and get more information and ideas. And in reality, it's just like he just didn't text you, or he was busy. So it doesn't. It's all good.
He's busy. And then we go into the
Yeah.
whole like, oh, but if a guy really likes me, then he'll never be busy enough to text me or to do this or to do that. But we don't know this person. Like we don't know their patterns. We don't know what they're like. We've gone on 1 date with them or maybe 2 dates with them. And like there's that saying out there, like if a guy really likes you, you're gonna know it. There's not gonna be any doubt in your mind. So you can speak to that as a guy if you want, because we talk about that, like a high quality guy who's clear on what he wants, sees what he wants, he goes after it. On the flip side of the whole texting thing too is A guy who texts you every day or texts you all day long after a first date isn't necessarily a healthy guy, and you might be attracted to him and you're thinking, oh, he's giving me so much attention. He texts me all the time, like multiple times a day. He's checking in on me. Sometimes those guys, like they're love bombing, or
Mm.
they end up down the line. You find out they're super needy and they're controlling. And so 3 months into the relationship, or even like a month into the relationship, you start to feel a certain way about it, because then when you're not responding to their text right away or whatever, they're like, oh, so where were you? They start questioning you. And you start feeling like, oh, why does he need to know that? Like, I was busy. So I took 2 hours to reply. So there's also that experience that we coach women around. And so it's a lot to navigate, but there's no formula, I guess is what I'm saying. If they do this, then they're good. If they
Well,
do
it's totally
this,
new
then they're
territory.
bad. Like we can't
Yeah.
categorize. People are too complex for that. And
Like,
and then two people dynamic coming together and having that dynamic, it's like there's no one unique dynamic out there.
it's new territory because technology is throwing such a massive wrench into things. Texting is only what, like 30 years old, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
if even that. I don't even know what I remember. I had my first phone when I was like 12, maybe 13, and we had to wait till after 8 o'clock at night to text unlimited. I remember how far
Yeah,
back it's
yeah,
going,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, but even prior to that, this is a funny. Remember, everyone hearing this idea of how, like, when cars came along as a new technology, it basically became a glorified sex wagon because you could go to a completely different town or a different city and just be a brand new person. Nobody knows who you are.
Right,
So if you want to put on like a new identity, or just go somewhere, have sex with a bunch of people, then come back and like act like nothing happened. So even with phones and texting, it adds a new layer of I can stay in contact with you 24 hours a day if I wanted to,
yeah.
anywhere in the world. So my
Mm-hmm.
connection to you is never unbroken. And then
Mm-hmm.
you start filling in the gap of like, well, because they could text me 24 hours a day, why wouldn't they be? Or
Yeah.
if they are, should they be? And should they be doing much with contacting you? But yeah, reading between the lines a little bit too much. Like, it's just an extra layer of processing your brain is trying to figure out every time you get a text, every time you do make a call or things like that. Facebook is another one. Instagram's another
Right.
one where you see them like liking different posts and liking other people's photos and whatnot. And so your brain's like, why did he like that? Why did she like that? What's going on over there? And just like you're constantly on guard for potential threats to your opportunity to be exclusive with this person in certain ways. It's just how our brains operated because there was constantly threats to those things in the environment. There's a good book. I do have it. It's called The Naked Ape. I think it might be backwards on your screen. I'm not sure.
No, I
Uh,
can read it. Mm-hmm.
it's basically a book by a zoologist who was looking at human beings as though it was like a brand new species. Like, how
Mm.
would a zoologist categorize human behavior through a zoology lens?
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about as one thing that's really interesting was like when we started to form hunter gatherer parties and the guys had to go out hunting, you'd think you'd optimize for just getting the strongest, fastest, best hunters possible to go out there, and the weaker guys would just stay behind. But they figured out pretty quickly if we leave the weaker guys behind, there's a good chance he's going to be sleeping with the women while we're gone, and we're doing all the work to bring the food back.
Mm.
So it's like they kind of there's points that essentially say like all the guys have to go together no matter what their status was. They all have to figure out how to work together. Because even back
Mm.
then, like even back in caveman times, there was still a chance that like somebody could be sleeping with somebody you didn't want them to.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
things like texting and phones, like now you have access to not only this person, but every other person you could ever want access to. Like if you're stressed out, you had a bad day, you want to like talk to your other friend who, like if you're a guy, you have trouble with your girlfriend, you're texting some other girl because you're stressed out and she's giving you the attention you want, that you wouldn't have got that attention because you'd have to go physically go find her in person. Now
Right.
she's right in your pocket at all
Yep.
times. Or
Yep.
porn is right in your pocket at all times. Like these
Right.
things are just right at your fingertips. And
Yep.
it's just adding these extra layers of difficulty to get people to not run down those internal rabbit holes to what's going on and just learn to just trust the person.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like when you have access to somebody and you have them in your contacts, that could be why he hasn't contacted you for a week, because he's busy doing something else or he's connecting with somebody else. Like, let's be real. Like, we have access to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So he might be getting attention that he needs from two or three other people or one other person, or he's busy. But then all of a sudden he has a moment where he's just sitting there and he's bored or whatever. And he's just like, oh yeah, I remember like Susan from a week ago or whatever. And then all of a sudden she's in his contacts and he can access her and he'd be like, hey, so what's up? And that's why we get those messages, men and women, like, oh yeah, I was just thinking about you. So what are you doing right now? And then the other person on the other side getting that message being like, oh, I haven't heard from this person for like a week or a month, and I was wondering what happened to them, and all of a sudden they're back in your orbit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's a term out there, orbiters. We call it orbiters. So it's just the guy that orbits around and then he pings you when he needs to, and then, he disappears and then he comes back. And it's like we just empower women, or we coach women on, or I should say I,
Yeah.
but, because I coach in a group and then I coach individually as well. But yeah, we just call them orbiters. And we're like, well, if you don't want them there, then what is it that you can do to get rid of those people? Because we have the ability to do that. And then the women are like, well, I don't know, like he must like me because he keeps like contacting me. And it's like, yeah, but you're triggered by it. You don't like it. That's not what you want. You're looking for a guy who's going to be consistent. And these guys are showing you that they're not. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you get them out of your energy field? How do you get them out of your orbit? Like, it's like,
Is there a way? I'm actually curious.
yeah, well, what do you think it is?
Just tell them
This is what
I'm
we
not
ask
interested.
women.
I'm not
Because I was
interested.
asked the same question. What
I'm
was
guessing it's
that?
just say like I'm not interested in anything right now, and I just don't feel comfortable maintaining this friendship as it
Yes.
is.
Yeah. Or we want different things, or, you could just ignore them, or you could block them. A lot of people, that's what a lot of people do. They're just like, I'm just going to block this guy.
Hmm.
I'm not a fan of blocking. Like, I feel like the more that you can communicate open and honestly with people, the more you're going to get into that like pattern of doing that and just being honest with somebody, because that's the thing that's missing a lot too. Like all this ghosting and being able to just disappear. Like you talk a lot about, like, before, when we didn't have social media or we didn't have texting, we'd have to actually phone somebody, or you would go to church and you would see people there. Like that was your community. You wouldn't be able to ignore somebody. Like if you went on a date with a woman in your community, you'd run into her eventually, like at church, or when you were shopping, or if you had a similar interest or something, or work. So you can't just ignore that person. But you know it's just common courtesy, going back to that common courtesy. You're using your common sense and saying, I know that we went on a date, or I know that this happened, but I'm just not, I don't think we're on the same page. But it was really great having coffee with you. Or it was really great having those conversations with you. I really appreciated your time. And then just moving on with your life. But I think anyone who receives that message from somebody is going to appreciate it, whether over getting
Gonna
ghosted
hurt at first,
or
but it's
just being
appreciated. Yeah.
ignored, or all of a sudden realizing you got blocked and not understanding why, because you didn't really do anything wrong. Um, but then, there's transparency there, and that's missing a lot from our world now, because there's so many opportunities to just not step up and just have that one small little interaction with somebody that just shows respect, and just lets that person know it's like, okay, this isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I guess it's tough for some people to close that door because it's like, well, what if you could reopen it down the road in different circumstances? And people might just become like,
Well,
well,
you
it's nice to have
can.
options. Yeah,
Well,
and I
you
guess the fear
can.
is like, what if I
Yeah.
close that door and it never opens up again or something like that? But yeah,
But
getting to
that's an
that point where,
illusion. Like if you really think about it, that's an illusion, because what's to keep you from going back and going, you know what? Like, now that I haven't been talking to you for a couple weeks, there's a couple of times where you came up and I was thinking about you, and I actually wouldn't mind like going out again.
hmm
Like, who says you can't change your mind? And the person can always say no to you.
hmm
But so many relationships, you know, are based on things like, oh yeah, like we met out a couple times and then a year later we met again and they're at different places and then they connect. And then they go out and they actually end up getting together. Or there's at least two or three people that I know that have said to me that they've connected with people that were in their friend group for the longest time, and they just never viewed the person that way. But then one day, just a certain conversation happened a certain way, and they started to just have more intimate conversations, and then started dating, and then got to a romantic level, and off they go. And now they're in a relationship, and some of them end up getting married. And they say that person was like right in front of me, but I just never thought about them that way, or I just never even considered them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so much stimulus out there, like
Oh yeah.
for us, like there's the whole social media thing has changed everything when it comes to dating. And then going back to what you said, like even when people are in relationships, like a topic that comes up a lot with women is, oh, he liked this girl's picture on Instagram. And then depending on what that girl looks like, it could be triggering, it might not be triggering. Some people think that it's like you shouldn't be liking anybody's pictures if you're in a relationship at all. Like you shouldn't, and other girls are like, well, I'm okay with it. Like it all depends on what works for you and what the dynamic is. And I think that also depends on the pattern of the relationship you're in. If you're feeling insecure in that relationship because certain things are continually triggering you, and then somebody goes and likes a picture and then it triggers you even more. Like some people are in a secure relationship and they know exactly who the person is in front of them. They're showing up with them. They're consistent in showing up with them. They like a picture, says, oh, it's just a girl I knew from high school. There's no issue there because they're in a healthy connection with somebody who's showing them that they're trustworthy. So there's so many dynamics. And like going back to what I said before, there's no one unique situation. What I meant to say was there's no one unique situation that we can apply a formula to. But then every situation, like two people coming together that are complex and have their own trauma, their own childhood patterns, their own way that they got, brought up, they have their own attachment styles, all of those kinds of things. Like there's so many dynamics there for the people that are connecting that have to be navigated, discovered, and explored in order to get to a point where the relationship is going to grow past just that dating phase. And then you need two people who are willing to do the work together. Like if you guys hate each other, like right from the get-go, there's so many obstacles to overcome, might not be the greatest fit.
Depends on what they hate each other over. If is it a hatred of things that are triggering you that you need to work through, or is it just a distaste of certain themes? Like my father remarried when my mother passed away, and he's a very stout Republican, and she's a very stout Democrat, and they'll get into like little scuffles once in a while over politics. But at the same time, she's like, "Fucking hate Trump." She's like, "I fucking hate Hillary." Oh, by the way, what do you want for dinner? Where do you want to go to eat tonight?
By the way, what?
By the way, what do you want for dinner? Where do you want to go to eat tonight?
Oh, yes.
And it's like, yeah, they disagree, but then at the same time, they still recognize there's still like below all that is still like love and appreciation for each other.
Yeah, because they're comfortable with each other and they know each other. They just know each other's dynamics. But there's people who they won't be able to do that because they haven't done enough of their own work. They haven't gone in and got to know themselves a little bit better, gone deeper into, okay, how or healed in a certain area where they can handle certain dynamics in relationships.
Yeah, and some of the point we're making about earlier about guys, and at least from my perspective, I think one big problem we're having nowadays is this thing referred to as the male sedation hypothesis. And the argument then essentially is that like this number of unmarried young men in a society, or uncoupled young men in a society, historically would have led to some kind of historical like societal collapse, usually through like gang violence or revolution or infighting. And it hasn't. And the argument as to why is that porn, weed, video games, basically. And it reminds me of this comedian, Sam Morrill, I think it was. He was talking like he said he was going on a date somewhere, and it's a bit of a raunch. It's a little touch raunchy, I guess, nothing too crazy. But his friend was like, if you're going on a date tonight, like you should masturbate before you go. So if you do end up having sex, it'll last longer. And then he's like, if that happens before I go on the date, there isn't going to be a date tonight.
Right.
And the idea of like that sex drive is kind of what's motivating guys to go out there and try to like work through that resistance of, put yourself together, try to approach a girl, get past the rejection, have the awkward conversations, get better at talking, like work on yourself, is now all the energy being offset over to porn. Or if you need to like numb yourself out with like, video games and weed and just drunk food eating and not leaving your house.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's getting a little crazy nowadays that like that kind of energy is being repurposed in such a crazy, unhealthy way. Yeah.
And that's part of why maybe that's the work that men have to do, like because of their whole
Yes,
like
that's yeah.
pull towards weed or pornography or whatever it may be. Like for women, it might be like sitting and watching Netflix, romantic movies, like we have our own things that we do as well. So, but I think at the end of the day, it's about the discipline, the self-discipline, being able to be like, okay, yeah, I have to, disengage myself from all these things that I do in order to ground myself again, or to put something into myself, or just, switch off, and then, but not staying there for too long. And I think that's where these things get so addictive that it's easy just to, like Netflix is set up where you can like, we used to be able to watch a show and then we'd have to wait a week to watch
Yep.
the next show in that series. Whereas now, depending on what show it is, you can watch like the whole thing. Like people say, oh, I had the marathon session with, a certain show, Game of Thrones or whatever. And you can spend a whole weekend watching it, but it's just that having that discipline to say, okay, and I've done it myself. Like I'm going to watch one episode and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk away. And then when I'm watching that episode, it ends. And of course, they always give you the cliffhanger. So it's like, I'm just going to watch the first 5 minutes because I want to know what happens. And then 20 minutes into that second episode, I'm like, oh, yeah, I was only supposed to be watching the first 5 minutes.
What's actually really funny about that is that the cliffhanger was designed intentionally because our brains do not like open loops of information. Really, like we're very much wired to try to complete it. There's a bit of an overlap though within the dating world where it's like, this is why on like a first or second date, or when you meet somebody, don't let the conversation go on indefinitely with anybody. If you're a guy or a girl talking to either, it's like it's you're kind of creating a cliffhanger in their mind about you, so that they want to go to the next episode of seeing you again. Whereas if you just give them like here's the story, here's the shocking part, here's the conclusion, see you later, bye.
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, because having some mystery, and people will argue that it's like, oh, you're just being gamey then. Like just let it flow the way it's gonna flow. Well, yeah, you can do that. You can do whatever you want. But yeah, you don't want to, like, it's always like kind of like when somebody says, oh, we talked for 4 or 5 hours the first time we talked. It's like that is looked upon as, oh, you guys must be like have a great connection, but it could also mean so many other things. It can mean just what you were talking about. It's like there's no cliffhanger. You're just putting it all out there, like right to a person when you don't really know anything about them yet, And if we go back to how people used to date, like you would just go out on a date and then, the man might call you like 2 or 3 days later, and then you might go on another date the next week. It wasn't like all of a sudden, the traditions were a little bit different back then, so people wouldn't jump into bed right away. But like that became like a whole thing where people would just be like, they would just meet and have sex on the first night, which no judgment if that's what you want to do. But, I think that is something that's also shifting a little bit. Like people are like, oh, okay, well, I want to know that this guy's going to want to see me even if I don't sleep with them. Or, but I don't know if that's a guy thing because guys work differently. But
personally, this is a personal opinion. Maybe I'm just a weirdo. I've gotten to a point where I've had enough, like, we'll say variety in my life that like I really, really like, I'm going to be sexually interactive with somebody. It's like, I want to really fucking know you. I want you to really know me and feel very comfortable with me. And I should feel very comfortable with you because it just adds like, there's a good quote. It's a guy named Wilt Chamberlain. He was a basketball player back in like the 60s or 70s, something like that. He was like the first basketball player to make like over $1 million a year salary, something like that, or $100,000. Whatever back then, it was a crazy amount of money for a basketball player to get. and he was super famous. He was tall, good looking, very charismatic. And they said like he estimated in his memoir he had like slept with over like 10,000 different women because he would just go to like party after party and just just not women just all chasing after him. And he said something like having like a lot of guys look at me and think like that sounds awesome, I'd love to do that, but he's like, but if I'm being honest with myself, I would have rather had the same woman 10,000 different times instead of 10,000 different. The idea being like you really get to like feel just like the more you get to know a person, the more your guard goes down, and the more your guard goes down, the more you can just let your monkey run wild, basically, in the bedroom or in other parts of your life. But yeah, I think people who chase like sex on like the first date or and very early on, like, well, they're just trying to fill like I wouldn't say neediness, but like a emotional void or gap or something like that. I just feel like I need to do this or else I don't feel like I'm worthy. Like sex addicts, for example, or people who are just addicted to those kind of things. They're just like the guys who get rejected. You're like, I need you to approve of me or else I don't feel worthy.
Right.
And so
Yeah. Well, and there is like scientific, studies done where they say that women connect differently than men do. Like women, they're usually motivated by the emotional connection. So I don't think that most women, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but most women are not wired that way to just sleep with like a whole bunch of guys and feel fulfilled. They start to get to a point where it's just like, well, I'm not, I'm just feeling like a certain way about putting my body out there in so many different ways, and there's no emotional connection. Like some of these guys, I never see them again, or whatever the case might be. Whereas men can stay detached and they can just function that way, and
you
they're getting a
can.
certain physical need met that satisfies them.
Even with that though, it's funny like that quote I said a second ago, but the idea like women do bond through sex on a different neurochemical pathway than men do. It's more pair bonding, from what I understand, within the first 6 months to a year to maybe 2 years, generally speaking, because it's like that's probably when I'm going to really fucking need your help with this kid in case I get pregnant. More or less. And I think 2 to 3 years is about the time frame when it kind of like starts to whittle down from there. But men, yeah, we're wired that we could like have multiple partners and whatnot. But then the trade off is that like hypothetically, if you get multiple partners pregnant, are you able to like keep them all the kids healthy and surviving into adulthood? Not every guy can be Genghis Khan. Things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what ends up happening with certain people is that you end up really, for lack of better words, damaging the circuitry associated with those kind of things. That if you, a guy or girl, if you have a shit ton of male or sex partners, that you will start to associate that activity with a certain like lack of interest or certain disconnectedness to it, that you won't really fully appreciate it or what it can do for you or what you can have in a healthy relationship for the long run. You kind of just wear it out in yourself. And it's like when you heard women having multiple sex partners getting like ran through or getting used or things like that. But from what I understand, like it can be some degree of your perception around it just becomes like warped, for lack of better words. And you lose the ability to really, or let's see, I don't think you could probably get it back, but you kind of wire yourself a certain way. Like I actually had an interview with my podcast about 2 weeks ago with a sex addict, and he's married. I think he has 4 kids, and he has like a whole group out there, like a church group he belongs to, is helping like spread awareness around it. And he talked about how it's just like he's married, has 4 kids, and like he loves his wife, but there's just like some other part of his brain that just fires off. It's just like this sets off his anxiety. He needs to go talk to this, or like have sex with this person, whatever it is. It's usually, I think, from what I understand, it's like sex addicts finding other sex addicts, just using themselves kind of as like coping mechanisms to kind of turn off their own anxieties in themselves. But like he can kind of differentiate like this is just a random hookup versus like this is the person I'm intimately in love with. And it's like if you do random hookup too much, you start to have a difficult ability to actually connect with somebody and be vulnerable with somebody in an intimate sexual manner.
Yeah. So he's just disassociating in some way to the different different things.
That's a perfect
So
way to put it. Yeah, he probably is
yeah,
like literally going on autopilot when something happens, some trigger from a childhood memory or trauma, something like that. It goes online, and he just literally just doesn't not even there, going through the motions.
yeah, yeah. So it's his coping mechanism on some level.
Yeah,
So there'd
yeah,
be like a lot to unpack there to get it back to what we consider like healthy in society, I guess. Because
yeah.
there's a whole bunch of different opinions out there about are we really supposed to be monogamous and all of that kind of stuff. So, and I have my whole opinions on that, but we don't want to go into that in this particular conversation.
I
So,
think monogamy is
yeah,
healthiest for everyone for societal stability. I think historically polygamy tends to lead to exploding societies across the board.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think generally speaking, it's like the vast majority of men can barely handle one person as it is. So why try more than that?
yeah,
It's enough to
yeah,
get to know somebody close and intimately to begin with. Why even try to expand that? And I think what happens there is like when you start seeking out multiple partners with your guy or girl, what you're basically saying is like I hear this a lot with people who have like multiple marriages, like they're on their fourth marriage or their fifth marriage.
right,
There's something in there like when you get to a certain point, like either the fun wears off, the honeymoon stops, or like you just something happens at some point which triggers something which turns you into a tailspin associated with some trauma you haven't dealt with before that makes you go, this isn't going to work out, it's not going to end it. But then you go, oh, but I miss being with somebody. Let's go get married. This is fun, and you start the whole
yeah.
cycle over again.
It's a
When in
pattern.
reality, being with like one person can really be beneficial to figure out like what is it that's causing me to go on to like this craziness like I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that, like, not to sound judgmental, but it's just a recognition of a pattern that's there.
Mhm.
And why is it there? And then where does it fail? Where did those relationships fail at one point? And then going into an exploration of that possibly, if
Mhm.
what you're seeking is to have a successful relationship in your life,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And then just that effort piece too. And I just think of like people who, the interview who are in their 80s and 90s and have been married for like 60 years or 60 plus years. And they ask them like, what was the formula for success? And it's so consistent. Like the responses that they give is always like compromise and being able to forgive,
Open
and then,
communication.
yeah,
Yeah.
communication. And so, and all of them say there were times where it was really tough,
Yeah.
but we just worked it out. It wasn't always, this happy, rosy, we always got along and, a bed of roses. Like they all say that, all of them. So it just it just leads me to believe that as a society, we've gotten to this place where we have access to all of these things, that we have so many options and there's
Yes.
so many distractions, and then we forget to look at what's in front of us and what that means to us. And sometimes we sabotage it.
There's a good book called The Paradox of Choice.
Hmm.
And it basically talks about the psychology of how when you have more options, you're less happy with the choice you made
Yeah,
of whatever it is that you bought
yeah,
or acquired or decided to jump into. And having optionality, well, optionality one part of the problem. The part of the problem is the idea of the work necessary to make a relationship work. It just seemed like it would just be easier to find somebody new, to start all over again, to go from the
hmm,
beginning.
hmm,
And the problem is, like, as
hmm,
you get older, it gets harder and harder. Let's say harder and harder to do, but like, you don't have the same optionality that you did when you were younger, or people change, or you spend a lot of time getting to know one person, and then also you got to start from square one.
yeah,
Aside from
yep, yep,
circumstances that force you to, like maybe like a spouse passed away or something like that. But yeah, like
yep.
there is it's a harder hill to climb, but it's more rewarding at the top.
Yeah, yeah. And also like the whole concept of the changing together. Because I mean, realistically, who you are in your 20s, as opposed to who you are in your 30s and then your 40s. Like we all have those phases of life that we go through. So if you're doing that with a person you're intending to stay with for the rest of your life and you get married when you're 25, Like you're going to have a lot of check-ins along the way with that person in order to continue to grow together and get yourselves, when you're on different pages, get yourself back on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And there's
seasons.
going to be times where you don't understand things and you're going to have to hold space for your partner and vice versa. And being able to do that and being uncomfortable. I would think that it would take a lot of times where I'm not very comfortable with this. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not going to run away. I'm going to navigate through this. I'm going to stay.
Yeah.
I'm going to support this person, and then I'm going to trust that this, when I get to that place where I'm going to need that support, that person's going to also be there for me, which is the whole trust piece.
Mm-hmm.
Like you hear this concept a lot now of love is not enough to keep two people together,
Mm.
because you can love somebody, but you might not be able to be in a relationship with them depending on, those other things. Like, there might be somebody who just can't get past like a certain addiction that they have to something, and it hurts that person time over time over time, and just it's just too hurtful. You can't be there anymore, like, or whatever the case might be. So there's so many different dynamics, and then, should I stay? Should I go? How long do I stay? How long do I put up with this for? Like, and so it takes two very dedicated people who want to work on their stuff,
Yeah.
and also who love themselves enough to work on their stuff and be like, I want to be a better person for this other person, but I also want to be a better person for myself,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of
Yeah.
the day.
Yeah, and having the foresight to acknowledge that you're going to have seasons of your life. And
Mhm.
the toughest part that I think that I get a lot of people to not really like, that self-awareness thing. Like for me, for example, I've been having trouble getting up in mornings lately. I'm just, for whatever reason, I'm just tanked. I have no desire to get out of bed.
Mm.
And I've had days where I'm just like, I could feel my brain going like, "This, why not? Just lay here until we feel like it. Whatever. It's just no point getting
Right.
up." And I say to myself, like, yeah, but I know if I get up, drink some coffee, go for a walk around the block, get some sunshine on my face, I will feel way the fuck better about today. But it's like when you're lying in bed feeling like crap and you're thinking, what to do today? I don't know, but it's gonna be terrible. Versus drink some coffee, go for a walk, do some jumping jacks, and all of a sudden you're like, what are we gonna do today? I don't know, but it's gonna be awesome today. It's like you have to be
Yeah.
aware of the ability to change your own brain chemistry, your own body chemistry in a way.
Yep.
This is what I've started working with my Kurt. I actually have like 2 coaching clients right now. I just got recently that I'm trying to help them like identify some trigger behaviors they have in their data sabotaging them. So like when that happens, what we're going to have you do, I recommend to do, is like write down how you feel, journal it in your phone, on a notebook, whatever it is, and then 5 minutes, 10 minutes of breath work, 50 push-ups, 50 jumping jacks, 50
Yep.
burpees, whatever you want to do. Write down how you feel afterwards. Because it's going to be like a
Mm.
10, 15, 10-minute span. And you're going to see within 10 minutes, I went from life sucks, what the fuck am I doing, to holy shit, life's great. And like
Yep.
all within a matter of just you doing a little bit to change something in between. And when you start to get that self-awareness to realize like, holy shit, I can actually influence how I feel towards things. If I just can push past, if I do certain things I don't want to do in the moment and take back control of my body, even in the
Body.
context of a long-term relationship, you'll have days where you're like, I don't think this is going to work out. Why not? Because I feel like shit right now. That's literally why. Go do something. Go hit the gym. Go for a walk. Go get some exercise. Go drink some coffee. Talk to a friend. Take a day off. Come back, and you're probably gonna like love the person again. And then you realize like, oh, my love is kind of conditional on how I feel. How I feel is conditional on whether I should do shit to take care of myself, or how I can affect my brain chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah. Just having that structure. Yeah. And then there's a component there where you do have to force yourself,
Yeah,
right? Because you can't feel good all the time. You're not going to feel good all the time. It's not realistic,
it's a
and you have to
dangerous.
honor where you are at. And then, like you said, using your body. Like the body will always tell the story. Like there's tons of books out there on body and how, whatever you're emotionally and mentally processing, it's gonna eventually show up in your body if you don't deal with it emotionally or mentally. It will manifest through your body. Like there's no if and or buts around that. It's gonna happen.
Oh yeah.
So, like I've done energy courses with an energy like master, where, because like I'm also a bioenergy practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
So his part of his training was not even just the techniques we used, but also the whole energy piece of, if you're going to be working with a client and you wake up, like you said, one morning and you're just like, I just don't want to get up. I feel like crap. I just want to lay in my bed. I can't deal with my life type thing. But you have, like, say, two people who are counting on you that day because you've made appointments with them and they're going to come and do energy work with you. That's fine that you feel that way. But his part of his training was to get us to be able to empower ourselves enough to get out of that mindset for the 45 minutes or hour that we were going to be with that person, so
Mm-hmm.
that we could
Mm-hmm.
be in the right frame of mind and in the right energy to be able to help that person, because that's our job. That was our job, to be
Yep.
the practitioner for that person. And I'm sure that you have to do the same thing with massage therapy. It's just like a different modality. And then at the end of the day, when you're finished or whatever, then you can go back into your, like, okay, like, I can be in this space now. But being able to shift into that. So it was like one of the best trainings that I ever took, because it has actually helped me to be able to shift into energy that I need to be in, even when on days that I don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
But then also realizing when I'm done that job, I can shift back into my energy, that I can honor what's going on with me and then deal with that as well, and not
Yeah.
suppress it. Because it's when we start suppressing things that we get into trouble.
Yeah.
And we talked about that with Connor Beaton in the course, and how at the beginning of each session, like, he went into the, like, okay, let's do just some breath work, and took us into, like, different techniques with breath, and said, how do you feel before you did the breath work? How do you feel after you did the breath work? And how, just like you were speaking to, in 5 minutes, you can literally change how you feel and how you're going to approach your day.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah.
It's crazy. This has been a fantastic conversation. Where can we find your content stuff?
Yeah, right now I'm on Instagram, Luisa B Coaching, at Luisa B Coaching. So that's where I am now. I'm still kind of putting myself out there in different ways. So yeah, and I've worked with women for 4 years now. But yeah, that's where you can find me and connect with me.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for the time.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thanks. This has been great. Always a pleasure.